I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I grew up in a mid-sized town where the county fair was the biggest thing that happened all year. It didn't matter if you were 9 years old or 90. Everyone went. The rides lit up the night sky, the smell of fried dough and kettle corn drifted everywhere, and there was always music and laughter echoing through the grounds. For my family, it was a tradition. Every summer, without fail, we'd all pile into the car, me, my parents, my older brother Nathan, and my younger sister Lily, and spend the entire day wandering from ride to ride, trying all the food stalls, and watching the competitions. Back then, I was the middle child. Nathan was 3 years older than me and always moving ahead, chasing whatever caught his attention. Lily was 2 years younger and tended to stay close to mom. My parents loved us, but they were easily distracted in public, especially at events like the fair. There was always someone to talk to, something that caught their eye. Most years it wasn't a big deal. We'd get separated for a few minutes here and there, but nothing serious, until the year it happened. I was 9 years old. It was early afternoon, and the fair was buzzing. I remember holding my mom's hand while Nathan darted ahead toward the game booths, yelling something about winning a goldfish. Dad spotted one of his old friends by the tractor display and stopped to chat, waving us to go ahead. Mom followed Nathan toward the livestock section, where there was a prize-winning goat she wanted to see. She must have assumed I was right behind her, but I wasn't. I had paused near the Ferris wheel ticket booth, distracted by a vendor selling tiny plush animals. I bought a small stuffed bunny with my own saved-up allowance and then turned to look for my family. They weren't there. I thought maybe they'd gone a few steps ahead, so I scanned the crowd. 5 minutes passed. 10. Still no sign of them. I stood on tiptoe, trying to see over the heads of strangers. People walked around me in every direction, laughing, carrying bags of popcorn, leading kids by the hand. My stomach started to feel tight. A food stall vendor noticed me lingering nearby and offered me a small cup of soda. I took it, thinking maybe my parents would be back any second. The vendor didn't ask if I was lost, and I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I'd done something wrong. 15 more minutes went by. Eventually, I started walking toward the main path, looking for them in every direction. The sun was lowering, the shadows getting longer, and the crowd felt louder and bigger. I finally found the lost and found tent, a small white canopy near the fair's entrance, where a tired-looking volunteer asked if I wanted to sit. I sat in a folding chair, hugging the stuffed bunny tight, while the volunteer kept glancing toward the crowd. Hours passed. I watched the fair change as the lights came on and the sky turned dark. People left with tired kids on their shoulders. Somewhere in the distance, the fireworks started, and I could hear people cheering. I just stayed in that chair, legs swinging, the soda cup long empty. It was close to closing time when I finally saw them. Mom rushing toward me, Dad a few steps behind her, both looking flustered. They were talking fast, apologizing, but also insisting they thought I'd been with the other parent. They laughed a little like it was a silly misunderstanding and quickly steered me toward the parking lot. I didn't say much on the ride home, just stared out the window. They never brought it up again, and when I tried once, Mom brushed it off with, "We all make mistakes." But over the years, I started to notice it wasn't just the fair. There were other moments, times they forgot to pick me up from school on early dismissal days. Family dinners where my plate was left off the table until I pointed it out. A school talent show they promised to attend but didn't show up to until it was almost over. None of these things were as big as being left behind at the fair, but they built up. I didn't cry about it anymore. I didn't even talk about it. I just kept a little mental list in my head, and slowly, that list turned into an idea. By the time I was in my late teens, I decided I wasn't going to just let it go. I didn't want to yell at them or demand an apology. I wanted them to feel it, the uncertainty, the waiting, the way your stomach sinks when you realize someone you're counting on isn't there. So I started small. If they invited me to a casual get-together, I'd leave out 1 or 2 details about the time. If we made plans to meet somewhere, I'd arrive late, blaming traffic or a last-minute delay. Nothing so obvious it seemed deliberate, just enough to make them wait. At first, it was almost like a private joke with myself. They'd greet me with that half smile people give when they're trying not to be annoyed, and I'd just apologize and move on. But each time, I'd remember that day at the fair, me sitting under that white canopy with my stuffed bunny, and it would make me want to keep going. They had taught me, without meaning to, what it felt like to be left behind. Now, I was going to return the favor. I was 20 when I decided to take my first real shot at making them feel what I had felt. It started with a Sunday brunch. My mom called a few days earlier, excited about a new Riverside cafe that just opened. She'd read about it in the paper, floor-to-ceiling windows, fresh pastries, coffee from some award-winning roaster. She told me they'd booked a table for 10 a.m. and suggested we all meet there. I said I'd just meet them instead of riding together, knowing full well they were the kind of people who showed up at least 15 minutes early to every reservation. That Sunday, I woke up with plenty of time to spare, but I moved slowly on purpose. Long, hot shower, toast and eggs for breakfast, even though I knew we were eating out. I painted my nails a soft blue and sat at the table waiting for them to dry. I didn't even get in the car until after 10:10. At 10:15, my phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I answered in the brightest voice I could manage and told her I thought the reservation was at 11. She said it wasn't, that they were already seated, and I told her I'd be there soon. I didn't rush. When I walked into the cafe at 10:45, they were halfway through their coffee. My dad looked up and said something about how it was nice I finally decided to join them. I sat down like nothing was wrong, ordered a cappuccino, and when he muttered something about being forgotten, I just told him, it happens, the same way they'd brushed me off years earlier. For a second, my mom's eyes narrowed like she was trying to place where she'd heard that before. Then she just smiled tightly and moved on. A few weeks later, I had my second move planned. They'd bought tickets for a play at the community theater and asked me to pick them up beforehand. I offered to handle the tickets too so they wouldn't have to worry about it. The show started at 7:30. I left my apartment at 7:25. When I finally walked into the theater, they were standing in the lobby, scanning the crowd. I handed them the tickets, apologizing about traffic, even though we all knew the drive only took 10 minutes without rush hour. We slipped into our seats 25 minutes after curtain call. That time, the reaction was different. They didn't tease me. They didn't make little comments. Instead, they started confirming details with me. What time, what place, twice. Sometimes more. A month later, my cousin was having an engagement dinner. The plan was for me to pick up my parents from their hotel near the venue so they wouldn't have to drive. I forgot until my phone buzzed with a text from my mom saying they were still waiting in the lobby. I told her I'd be there in 10 minutes, but I didn't leave my apartment for another 15. By the time I pulled up, they were standing outside, my dad with his hands in his pockets, my mom holding her clutch like it was a shield. We walked into the restaurant after the first course had already been served. A toast was in progress, and the sound of our chairs scraping across the floor made a few people glance our way. My dad smiled stiffly at the table, and my mom smoothed her hair like it might erase the fact that we were late. During the meal, Mom leaned toward me and said I'd been slipping lately. She tried to make it sound casual, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. I cut into my food and told her I thought you'd figure it out, like I had to at the fair. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. For a second, I thought she might say something, but instead she just went back to eating. The rest of the evening was polite but tense. We smiled for photos, laughed at the right moments, but it was all surface level. When we finally left, the car ride to their hotel was quiet. At the curb, they lingered for a moment before getting out. We exchanged a long look. There was recognition in it, but not the kind that comes with a confession. Just awareness. They still weren't ready to talk about that day, but I could tell they were starting to remember it without meaning to. Christmas Eve rolled around, and my mom asked if I could come early to help set the table and prep the food. The plan was for me to arrive at their place by 4, so we'd be ready before guests started showing up. I left my apartment at 4:45. By the time I walked through the door, the kitchen smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon, and the table was already half set. My dad was carrying in a stack of plates from the dining room, and my mom was arranging candles. He glanced at the clock, then at me. I smiled and said, "Guess I'm just keeping up with the family tradition," before heading to the kitchen to pour myself a drink. In January, they asked if I could drive them to a retirement luncheon for one of my dad's coworkers. The event was set for noon at a local country club. I picked them up at 12:10. The drive was about 20 minutes, and when we walked in, people were already settled in their seats. The speeches had started. We slipped into a table at the back, and my parents stayed quiet for most of the meal. I could see it now. They weren't just annoyed. There was a certain stiffness, like they'd started to realize these weren't one-off accidents. A couple of weeks later, we had a plan for a day trip to the outlet mall 2 towns over. My mom had been talking about it for weeks, listing the stores she wanted to visit and the sales she'd heard about. The meeting spot was the parking lot of a diner near the highway. They were waiting there when I pulled up, 25 minutes late, and it was cold enough that you could see your breath in the air. My mom's coat was buttoned to the top, and my dad was rubbing his hands together. I stepped out of the car and told them, "I know it's not fun to stand around wondering if the other person has you covered." My mom's face softened just for a second before she straightened and walked to the car. February came with my birthday. They had made brunch reservations for 10:30 at my favorite spot downtown. I showed up at 11:10. From the outside, I could see them through the window, sitting at the table, looking around between sips of coffee. I walked in, hung my coat on the back of the chair, and said hello like I was right on time. Halfway through the meal, I told them, "Sometimes you just assume someone's got you, and then you're left." My dad set his fork down and asked if I was talking about the fair. I sipped my coffee and said, "Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not." From then on, the reminders they gave me before any plan felt heavier. They'd repeat the time twice, sometimes 3 times, and follow it up with a text the night before. There was no teasing in their tone anymore, just a kind of carefulness. They were starting to connect the dots, but they still hadn't said what I wanted to hear. In early spring, my parents decided we should all take a weekend trip to a lake cabin a couple of hours away. It wasn't just them this time. Nathan and his girlfriend were coming and Lily with her fiancé. The plan was to meet at my parents' house at 8 in the morning so we could all caravan together. They made sure to tell me twice, even texting me the night before with the time and address I already knew. When I woke up, I didn't even bother to check my phone. I left it on silent and moved slowly through my morning. Coffee, shower, packing my bag like I had all the time in the world. I didn't leave my apartment until well after 8:30. By the time I pulled into their driveway, Nathan's car was parked out front, but my parents' SUV was gone. Nathan stepped out of the house holding a travel mug. He told me they'd already left, figuring I must have been running late. I widened my eyes a little and said I thought we were all just meeting at the cabin. He shook his head, looking a bit confused, then got in his car to follow me. The drive was easy, no traffic, but I kept my speed low and stopped once for gas even though I didn't really need it. By the time we got to the cabin, everyone else was already there, sitting on the deck overlooking the lake. They'd had a boat outing scheduled for the morning, but the rental window had been tight and the slot was gone by the time we arrived, with no availability until late afternoon. My dad mentioned something about kickoff times as we walked up the steps. I gave him a small shrug and told him, "Sometimes you just think someone else has you covered." He didn't respond, but I saw Lily glance between us like she'd just caught the tail end of an argument. The day went on without much comment. People unpacked, made lunch, wandered down to the water. By dinner, everyone was gathered around the long wooden table inside the cabin. My mom, serving a salad, mentioned how inconvenient it was when one person's delay changed everyone's plans. The words hung in the air. I looked at her and said, "That's exactly what the fair felt like." The table went quiet. Nathan's fork paused over his plate, and he asked what I meant. My parents exchanged a quick look, and my dad steered the conversation toward a completely different topic before I could elaborate. It worked for the rest of the table, but I noticed Nathan's eyes linger on me for a second longer before he joined in on the new topic. The evening ended without more comments, but the atmosphere felt heavier. It wasn't the same casual silence as before. This time there was something deliberate about it, like my parents were very aware of what I just referenced but weren't ready to say anything out loud. A few weeks after the lake trip, we had another family event on the calendar, a close family friend's wedding reception. It wasn't the ceremony, just the evening party, but it was still a big deal. My parents had been friends with the groom's family for decades, so they were determined to be there. I offered to drive them. The venue was in a part of town that could be confusing to get to, with a maze of small streets and one-way turns. I knew they'd appreciate not having to navigate it themselves. What they didn't know was that I already had my plan. The reception started at 6. I told them I'd pick them up at 5:15, giving us plenty of time to park and get inside before the cocktail hour. On the day of the event, I didn't even leave my apartment until 5:25. On the way, I texted them about a road closure I'd just run into, making it sound like I was dealing with a mess of detours. By the time I pulled up to their place, my mom was standing on the porch in her dress coat, holding a small clutch. My dad was by the door, checking his watch. They got in the car without saying much, and we drove the 25 minutes to the venue in near silence. When we finally arrived, the first dance was already over, and most of the cocktail hour had passed. Guests were settling into their tables, drinks in hand. The energy of the room had already shifted into dinner mode, and my parents looked slightly out of place as they tried to blend in with conversations that had already started. As we sat down, my mom muttered under her breath that we'd missed all the good stuff. I looked at her and said, "Yeah, it's tough when you're left behind." Her jaw tightened, and she focused on her plate. Later in the evening, I overheard my dad talking to one of the groom's uncles. He mentioned that they'd been left hanging before. Then he glanced at me for just a moment before looking away. When I stepped away from the table to get a drink, Lily found me near the bar. She asked quietly why I kept doing this, being late, making everyone wait. I gave a vague answer about timing not always working out, but her frown didn't fade. She didn't press though, and we both went back to our seats. The ride home was quiet. My parents didn't start any small talk, and I didn't break the silence either. As we pulled into their driveway, my dad stayed in his seat for a second longer than usual. He finally said, "We do remember Clara." I just nodded and let the words sit there. For their 35th wedding anniversary, my parents booked a reservation at one of the most popular fine dining spots downtown. It was the type of place where you had to call weeks in advance, where every table was dressed in crisp white linen, and the servers moved like clockwork. They wanted to make it special, and they asked me to join them for the evening. I offered to drive. It made sense. They both wanted to enjoy wine without thinking about parking or traffic afterward. They agreed without hesitation. The reservation was for 7 p.m., and I told them I'd pick them up at 6:30. That would have given us plenty of time to get downtown, even with traffic. On the day itself, I didn't leave my apartment until after 6:40. I didn't send a text or make a call to explain. I knew exactly what that delay would mean, especially since rush hour was just winding down. By the time I reached their house, both of them were standing outside. My dad had on a dark suit, leaning against the porch railing with his hands in his pockets. My mom wore a deep blue dress and a shawl, holding her clutch with both hands. Neither of them smiled when they got into the car. We pulled into downtown traffic with the clock already ticking towards 7. The drive wasn't bad, but the extra minutes had stacked up. When we finally reached the restaurant, the lobby was crowded with people waiting for tables. The host checked the list and told us our table had been given to another party after we didn't arrive on time. We'd have to wait until something opened up. We stood near the entrance for almost an hour. My mom kept glancing at the dining room as servers passed by with plates of food. My dad scrolled through his phone, checking it every couple of minutes like he was looking for something to pass the time. When we finally sat down, menus were placed in front of us, but no one reached for them right away. I looked across the table and said, "It's not great wondering if someone's going to show, is it?" My mom's eyes snapped up. Her voice was tight when she told me they had already apologized for that day. I set the menu down. "I'm not looking for an apology," I told her. "I want you to understand what it felt like." After that, the meal stayed quiet. Conversation was clipped, limited to ordering food or asking for water. My dad rubbed his temples a few times, and my mom kept moving the food around on her plate more than eating it. When we finished and walked outside, the air was cool and the streetlights reflected off the damp pavement. I gave them both a hug before they left. As I stepped back, I said, "Now you know." My mom's shoulders stiffened at the words. My dad didn't say anything, but he held onto the hug for a second longer than usual before letting go. Driving home, I didn't replay the dinner or their reactions. I knew they were already doing that themselves. They weren't just recalling that day at the fair anymore. They were feeling it. Late that summer, my parents invited me over for a family barbecue. Nathan and Lily were going to be there with their partners, and it happened to fall on the same weekend as the county fair. The first time in years they'd actually be in town for it. The timing couldn't have been better. I didn't tell them I had a plan, but I knew exactly how the day would go. Instead of arriving late like I usually did, I pulled into their driveway 15 minutes early. My mom opened the door looking slightly surprised, still in the middle of setting out coffee cups. My dad asked if I wanted a drink, and we sat in the kitchen talking while they finished prepping. Between sips of coffee, I suggested we stop by the fair for a bit before everyone came over. For old time's sake, I said. My mom's hands hesitated over the sugar bowl for just a second, and my dad looked at me like he was trying to read my expression, but they agreed. The fairgrounds were already buzzing when we got there. The smell of fried dough and grilled sausages carried on the breeze. Kids ran past us with balloons, and the hum of rides filled the air. My mom's shoulders seemed to tighten as we walked in, and my dad's eyes lingered on the Ferris wheel, the exact spot they had lost me all those years ago. After a few minutes wandering past stalls selling fudge and lemonade, I pointed toward a food vendor and told them I'd meet them at the carousel bench in a few minutes. They nodded, and I walked off. I didn't go to the vendor. I cut across the path toward the far end of the fairgrounds, staying close enough that I could still see them if I stopped in the right places. At first, they sat on the bench chatting. My mom checked her phone once, my dad looked around casually. After 10 minutes, their body language changed. My dad started glancing toward the pathways more often. 15 minutes in, he was standing up and pacing a little, scanning the crowd. My mom stayed seated, but was looking from side to side, her face tightening. By the 25-minute mark, my dad had walked several yards away from the bench twice before coming back. My mom was now on her feet, hands gripping her purse strap. At 30 minutes, I saw her mouth the words, "Where is she?" to my dad. It was the same tone, the same panicked look I remembered from that night decades ago. That was when I walked back toward them, holding a lemonade. My mom turned quickly, relief flashing across her face. Her voice was unsteady when she told me they hadn't known where I went. I took a sip of the lemonade and said, "Now you know exactly what I felt, alone and waiting." My dad didn't look away. He told me they had both thought I was with the other back then, and that they had failed me. My mom reached for my hand and said they understood now, and that it wouldn't happen again. I didn't respond. I just held their gaze until they both looked away. From then on, anytime we made plans, the meeting point was clear, the time was set, and there was no guessing about who was with who. The fair became part of our summers again, but this time, no one got left behind.